Hello everybody, welcome. Today we're going to read an Excel sheet using a library called XLSX. We're going to use React for this project. We're going to be reading multiple sheets and displaying the data in a table, and we'll later see how to switch between the different tabs using radio buttons and display the data in our sheets. Stay tuned and watch till the end. Okay, now let's start by looking at our HTML project here. So basically we have a simple HTML page. This is actually an admin template. This is a project I've been working on. So how we build this admin template is out of scope for this particular project. We're just going to look at how to read a sheet and display the data. So let's go to the HTML. I am using React Strap for this project, and so it's basically bootstrapped in React. It's got some good components in there. It's just a basic simple card component which displays a title and has a body. So now let's build the file import tool and add our input controls. For that, let's go to our read Excel. This is where I have the component. Let's add a new file. Let's call it Excel import tool.jsx.js. Okay, this is going to be a functional component. Okay, now let's save it. So I'm just going to put it right at the top, right here, Excel import tool, right here, and let's save it. Okay, it shows up right here. Now let's go to our Excel import tool and start building it. All right, let's start by adding a row from React Strap. Let's import it. Row from React Strap. Let's remove this. Then let's add a column. We gotta import that too. Okay, once we have a column, let's add a div inside. Let's give it a class name of, let's leave it empty for now, and then let's add an input. This is going to be a type of file, and it's going to accept only XLSX and XLS, and then we're not going to accept multiple, so we're going to set that to false. Then on change, let's write a function event called say handle file, and we're going to pass this. Let's close the tag, and then we have to write this function. So let's come here, const handle file event. Let's console.log the file and save it. Okay, no errors. Now let's open. Let's go to my files. Let's open this, and okay, we have the file being read here. Okay, now let's add some messages and labels to this control so that we can be a bit more user-friendly. The first thing I'm going to do is add a label which says please upload a file. So let's go back right here. I'm going to import the label from React Strap, and I am also going to add a new div here. Let's add a class of, let's give it some margin bottom. So this is a React Strap helper class, which gives a margin bottom of 2 EM. And then also we need, let's track if the file is imported or not. So I'm gonna use state. Actually use state snippet, here it is. So let's call this file name, set file name, and it's going to be default of null. Let's save, and then we're going to come right down here, and we're going to say if file name is not set, and then we're going to display a label, and this label is going to say please upload a file. Okay, let's look at our page here, and we have a label right here. Awesome. So once we upload a file, let's now set the file name right here. For that, let's come here. We're going to first get the file. File is going to be e.target.files of 0. We're going to check if file exists. If it doesn't, we're going to return. And then we're going to set the file name. Set file name. It's going to be no, we already have the file, so it's going to be file.name. Okay, and then let's come right down here. Let's copy this. Now, once we upload the file, we're going to display the file name right here. So for that, we're going to put file name here. And yeah, that looks about right. Let's save. Let's upload a file. And we have the file name right here. Awesome. Okay, let's give it a small label right here. Let's call it file name. Okay, that looks better. Okay, now we have our file name set, but if you check here, we do not have any checks to see if our uploaded file is an Excel sheet or not. So for that, let's write a validation function. First, I'm going to write a constant called acceptable file names, and it's going to be an array. So the extensions are XLSX and XLS. And then once we do that, we come right here, right before we set the file name, and we're going to set if let's write a function. Let's call it check file name, and it takes a name, and we're going to return acceptable file name dot includes. This is a JavaScript function. So the name is basically going to be in the format of file.extension. This is the standard file name. So what we have to do is we'll have to split this by a dot, and then we're going to take this and check against our acceptable file name. So how do we do that? So let's do split by dot. So this will split it. We can write a 1, but it might break because sometimes if a file might be like file.file1.extension, so in that case we'll have to pop the last element. So in that case we're going to write a pop. So this basically, if you look at the documentation for pop, removes the last element from an array and returns it. So by default it will get the last element, no exception. And we're gonna do a lowercase, and then we're gonna just return the result. Okay, now let's use this function. So if check file name of file.name, then we alert invalid file type, and then we return. Okay, let's see if this works. So now let's refresh the page. Let's go here. Let's see if I have any files here. Okay, this is it, EML file. Okay, here it says invalid file type. Wonderful. Okay, now let's add a function to remove the file from our file input. So if you upload a file, we don't have a control to basically delete the file from our memory. So let's add something to do that. So for that, I'm gonna put something right below our input. This is gonna be when we set our file. Actually, let's change the bracket. And this is gonna be an I tag, which is self-closing. Let's just, I have a class already here. This is a built-in component for this admin template. And on click, I'm just gonna call handle remove. Let's copy the file name, function name. Let's come here and we're gonna write this function. So what this is gonna do is basically set file name, it's gonna set it to null. And not only that, we'll have to somehow clear the input here too. So let's do that. So for that, let's see the demo actually before we do anything. So let's refresh. Let's upload a file. We have the file name here. If you click on X, it deletes the file name, but the file is still here. So now let's clear this file. Okay, for that, we are going to need a reference to this input. So for that, let's go to the very top. We're going to import useRef. And let's call it fileref is equal to useRef, which is empty. And we're going to come to our file right here. And we're going to set ref is useRef. Sorry, fileref. And once we clear the file name, we're going to set fileref.current.value is going to be empty. Okay, now let's refresh, come here, and then let's clear, and there's no file. Wonderful. Okay, so we have a small bit of problem here. I realized we only currently have reference to the file name here. We don't store the file. So I'm just going to add a reference to the file directly. We're going to call it set file, and it's going to use state of null. And when we handle the file, we're going to rename this to, let's rename this to my file. And then once we validate it, we're going to set the file here, set file, file.no, we're going to call it my file. That is great. Yeah, and also when we delete the file, we're going to set file to null. Okay, we don't have any more errors. That is great. Okay, now let's start reading the file and parsing it. So to do that, we'll have to first import the XLSX library from npm, which I already have. And now let's come to our handle file function right here. We're going to read the XLSX metadata, and then we're going to assign the sheets. So let's start by declaring a useState snippet. I'm going to call it sheet names. This is going to be an empty array. We're just going to basically read the XLSX metadata and set the sheet names to this variable. So now let's read the XLSX. So for that, it's very simple. First, you got to read the file as an array buffer. Once you do that, you read the data into the library. And once I read that, let's just console.log it. Okay, now let's see if we get any errors. Okay, it's now await, so we have to make an async. Wonderful. Let's upload the sheet. Okay, it is saying file is null. Oh, it's gotta be actually my file. Okay, now let's upload. Actually, let's refresh. And there we go. We actually have parsed it, and we have our metadata, all the metadata here. So let's expand sheet names, and we have two sheets, sheet 1 and sheet 2. So now let's get the sheet names and assign it to our sheet names variable. So for that, let's come back. We're going to come here and set sheet names wb.sheetnames. Okay, that is great. So we've done reading the XLSX sheets and assigning the sheet names. Now let's see how we can display the data and do some manipulations. Okay, now let's actually read the data from our sheets and let's assign it to an object. So for that, I'm going to write a small function here called read data from Excel. This is going to take the workbook, and we're going to write an arrow function. Then when we come here, we're going to call this read data from Excel. We're going to pass this workbook. Okay. Actually, let's just pass the data right here. And once we come here, we get the data. Let's open this up. And also we're gonna set the sheet names here, and also we're gonna read the workbook right here, and let's console.log it. Okay, let's refresh, upload. That's great. Now let's loop through all the sheets, and this is what we gotta do. We gotta loop through the sheets and then assign data from sheet into objects. So now let's loop through the sheet for where I is 0, I less than wb.sheetnames.length I++. So where let sheet name is going to be wb.sheetnames of I, and then we're going to console.log sheet name and just see how it looks. Okay, now let's upload the file. Oh, we gotta refresh it. Let's upload a file. Okay, we get the two sheet names. That's great. Now let's read the data from the sheet name and assign it to an object. For that, I'm gonna write a use state snippet sheet data. This is gonna be an empty object. Okay, so the structure of the sheet data is going to be something like this. So let's write some comments. This is how it's going to be. So it's going to be like this, and sheet 1, it will have some data, sheet 2, and we have some data. So that's the structure of the sheet data. So let's come here, and we're gonna. So how do we read the data from our sheets? So let's go to the documentation. So we already had this some time back. We had the read file here, and then to JSON. Okay, here it is. Okay, so here it is. This is how we do it. So let's come here. Okay, so let's hold on a second. Okay, now let's actually start reading the sheets. Okay, so let's call it JSON data. It's going to be xlsx.utils.sheet to JSON, and we're gonna pass a worksheet. So in order to get the worksheet, let's define a constant. Worksheet is gonna be wb.sheets of sheet name. Okay, and then we're gonna pass the worksheet. What's the second one? We don't have any options, so let's just leave it empty. And we're gonna assign. Let's actually define a constant variable here, where my sheet data is going to be an object. My sheet data dot of sheet name is going to be JSON data. Okay, and once we've done this loop, we'll have an object which we will assign it set sheet data, and we're just going to set that right there. And then we're going to console.log set my sheet data. Okay, now let's check for any errors. There's no errors. Let's upload a file. Okay, so if we expand the object, let me zoom in here. So we have an object with sheet 1, and it has a data of about 11,000 records, and then we have a second sheet with about another 11,000 records. So that's great. So here we're reading all the data and assigning to our sheets. Now let's display this data in our table. Okay, so once we uploaded the data from our Excel import tool, we should notify our parent component, which is the read Excel. So for that, we're going to write a function called onFileUploaded. This is going to be a function, and it has an event, takes an event, handle file uploaded, and that looks good. Now let's write this function. This takes an argument, and then we're just going to basically console.log file uploaded, and let's just console.log it. And let's come back to the export tool. Once we upload the file, this is where we call it. We basically say props.on file uploaded, and the data we're going to pass is my sheet data. So actually, let's return this sheet data from here. Sheet data. And let's assign it to my sheet data, and we're going to call this function with this variable. Okay, looks good to me. Alright, let's save it. Let's refresh. Let's upload a file. Okay, props is not defined. That is a simple error. We'll have to import props right here. Let's refresh. Let's upload. Okay, we have file uploaded, and we have our 2 sheets with all the data. That is awesome. Now let's display the data in our table. So once we get the data here, we'll have to store it in a constant. So we're going to write a useState snippet. It's already imported, so we're going to call it sheet data, and this is going to be default to null. Okay, and once we get it here, we're going to set sheet data. We're just going to set the data here, and let's come back right here to our Excel import tool. So once we upload the file, we call this function, but also we'll have to call this function when we reset the data. On file uploaded, this is going to be null. That way, when you click on the X icon, it clears the data in the parent too. Okay, let's delete this typo. Looks good. Now let's start writing the tables. Let's start exporting the data into the table. Okay, now let's start writing the table. So this table should show up only when we have the sheet data. So let's put it inside the sheet. And this is going to have a column, bootstrap medium class 12. Then it's going to have a bootstrap table. And let's check the class name for that. Where's that? I got it right here. So let's leave it for now. This will have a T head and followed by a T body. Okay, that is good. Okay, so when we get the data here, we'll have to set the default sheet. So if he has 3 sheets, we have to select a default sheet, and then every time we select a different sheet, we'll have to update it. So let's write a useState snippet. Let's call it sheet. Let's rename this to sheet. This is going to be null. And right here, we're going to check if e dot e not equal to null. Actually, we can just, if e, we can call set sheet e of 0. Okay, let's just leave it at that. Actually, no, what we get here is an object like this. So we'll have to get the keys and get the first one. So for that, let's write object dot keys of e, and then we're gonna take the first one. Okay, and let's just put the let's just output the sheet name here. Sheet. Okay, let's refresh. Okay, we have our output and we have our sheet name selected by default. That is awesome. Now let's extract the data from our object, which is going to be this. So by default for sheet 1, it will expand and list all the data from all this. So let's do that. Okay, I just noticed something. Let's upload a file and see how the structure of it looks. So it's basically an object with its each key and value pair. So we'll have to change that in a way so that the first row contains so that we have to change into something like this. So the first row will contain all the headers, and then the rest will contain the data. So in order to do that, we'll have to change the way we read the file. So let's do that. So let's come here to our Excel import tool, and where we parse here, we'll have to pass options. So the first option we're going to do is blank rows. We're going to set it to empty, and the header, we're going to say where the header is. We're going to say it's on the first row. Let's save it, refresh. Let's check it now. Oh, okay, here it is. So the first row is all the headers, and the next row and the following rows are all just the data. That is awesome. Now let's read this headers and print it in our table. Okay, now let's actually start writing the table headers. So let's open a bracket here, and we're gonna actually go through the sheet data. The sheet data contains an object of sheets, and we're gonna get the sheet, and from the sheet we're gonna get the first row, which is the headers, and we're gonna map it and call it h, and it's gonna be a header, and we're just gonna output the name. And let's save. Let's come back. Let's upload a file. And we have all the header names. That's great. However, we do have a couple of errors here because it needs a unique key. So let's just come here and set key to, we assume the header is going to be unique, so let's just set it to that. Let's refresh, set. Okay. So it also says th cannot appear as a child of tr. Okay. Alright, let's do something. Let's go back. It should be td if I'm correct. Okay. Let's refresh, browse. Oh, come on. What's happening here? Oh, my bad. I forgot the TR. It should have a TR here, and okay. Now it looks good. Okay, no more errors. Wonderful. Now let's actually, now to read the body, let's come back here. We will actually copy the same thing and paste it here. So instead of this getting the first row, we're going to have to slice the first row so that we get everything except the first row. And then this, let's rename this to a row. And then this is going to be TR. This is going to be TR. And then instead of outputting the row, we are going to map the row. So each row has a bunch of columns. Columns comes to column, and this is going to be a TD, and then we're just going to print out the column right here. And there's going to be no key for now. We'll come back to that later. Let's refresh. Okay, wonderful. So we have the data and the sheets right here. Awesome. Now let's actually put a radio button that helps us switch between the different tabs in the same sheet. For that, let's come back right here. So I'm going to write a constant use state snippet sheet names. This is going to be a null by default when we get here. So here we actually set the sheet, so let's actually get this right here. Let sheet names is going to be this. Set sheet names of sheet names. And then if it's empty, then we're going to set it to null. Okay, and then we're going to get the first from here and set it. Okay, and once we get that, we're going to add a radio button list right here. Okay, so for that, let's actually add a row, and also we need to enclose the whole thing in a fragment. We're going to add a row, column, full width. Then we're going to put a bunch of radio buttons, sheet names dot map. Sheet names returns an input, type of radio, name is going to be sheet name, and then value is going to be S, and key is also going to be S. Okay, let's save, refresh. Okay, we have 2 sheets. Let's add a label for that. Let's add a div. Oh, let's add a div. And we're going to give it a label of S. Okay, we have 2 sheets, sheet 1 and sheet 2. And let's format it properly, and we're going to select it based on the selected one. So checked is going to be S equal to sheet. We have a default sheet selected up right here. So if that's selected, it's going to be checked. So let's set it here, refresh. Okay, it's automatically selected here. So it's giving us some warnings here. First, each list should have a unique key. We'll come back to that later. Yeah, provided a check prop to a form field without on-change. Okay, so what it's basically saying is we should write an on-change handler here. On-change, it goes to an event. Let's open a bracket. E handle sheet change of E. Let's write this function. Constant handle function takes an event, and then set sheet E dot target dot value. Okay, that is great. Once we do that, once we change the sheet, we'll have to actually it'll update itself. Let's go and check. All right, let's browse, update. Okay, see, it automatically changed. So let's click on sheet 1. It changed the data. Let's click on sheet 2. It changed the data. Wonderful. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you have any questions, please leave it in the comment section. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you.